Good morning. Good morning to everyone, and thanks for having me. Um, we Let me put your question in a perspective and rephrase it a bit. These have been transformational times for the power sector. Notwithstanding the talk about the NPAs, I mean, on the positive side, I think the biggest has been the launch of Pradhana Mantri Sahaj Bijli Har Ghar Yojana, which is Saubhagya, which really seeks to push the last mile to every household in this country. That is, we are talking about 420 lakh households being powered in the next over a period of 420 days, which is before 31st December. I think this is the biggest program which will see a major transformation in the rural economy in terms of the MSME expansion, health, education impact. I think it's one of the major transformational programs that has been launched, and we REC being the nodal agency are expecting to be fully financed. It's a 16,000 crore program, which this year is 4,000, and next year we are hoping for a 12,000 crore. That's on the demand side. And then as you know, the Uday is making a big difference in terms of the operational efficiency of the distribution companies. That should really augur well in terms of the investment that's being made under Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana, which is to the tune of 80,000 odd crores. And this would result in a much bigger system strengthening across the country, which basically means those latent demands, those bottlenecks in terms of the distribution, the demand and supply dissonance would be evened out in the coming year. We also are close to completing the electrification of the villages, of the 18,548 villages which were unelectrified on 15th of August 2015, when the Honorable Prime Minister announced that they would be electrified. Only 1,272 remain unelectrified, so that we hope to complete in the next 90 days. So in the sense, so all this together and a big push on the renewables, the emerging electrical vehicles, the charging infrastructure, the storage infrastructure, the upgradation of the existing power plants to conform to the environmental norms, all this augurs very, very well for the power sector financing and the power sector growth. And we are also making both the financial institutions, the government with the Reserve Bank of India to address the NPA issue, though REC has much less exposure in this segment. So the addressing the NPAs, we expect the government to support us in our endeavors. The already government has come up with a number of initiatives for recapitalizing some of the banks which is in need of this capital, and I'm sure those will be sustained, and a much more coordinated action. The Reserve Bank of India has set in place a statutory mechanism of the Joint Lenders Forum and the other such institutional arrangements for a close coordination and addressing these problems of NPAs much more comprehensively, and that's precisely what we are doing. And I'm very confident the government would continue to support us in that endeavor. No, you see, the power generation essentially is a market-driven mechanism. Our financing is independent of the government financing. Government makes its investments essentially where it is most needed, that is in the distribution segment and in the transmission segment in a much bigger way. And several state governments and also the central PSUs like NTPC, NHPC continue to make investment in terms of both in stabilizing, expanding, and in conforming to the new environmental norms. There are states which are taking up new projects, but the big push is on the renewable segment with solar, wind, waste to energy, biomass, small hydro, and those areas continue to receive the government support in a substantial manner, both through a policy drivers and also working on both the policies and the priorities. So overall on the generation side, at the moment we have about 330 gigawatts of installed capacity. The goal is to reach 540 gigawatts in the next 2 years, of which 175 is to come from the renewables. So that is pretty much, those plans are pretty much on track. What we are expecting is a big demand, a big upsurge in the demand push, and I'm sure the government budget through its instruments of stimulating growth, Make in India program, should really generate much higher demand than what we have witnessed in the last few years. And then the big push also in the new frontier technologies. Yes, go ahead. It's already known that we are at an advanced stage in terms of financing hydro projects in the neighboring countries, Bhutan and Nepal. There we are all geared up for that, and we are exploring business opportunities in African continent, in West Asia, where again there's a huge demand for services across the value chain of the power spectrum. And so we have subsidiaries which are quite active in this segment, the transmission, REC PDCL and REC TPCL, which are in the transmission and the distribution segments. And our joint venture company with NTPC and PFC, which is EESL, the Energy Efficiency Services Limited, which is well known for the major upswing in energy efficiency in this country. And which is now active in the frontier technologies like electrical vehicles, charging infrastructure. So all this actually is a huge example for several other developing countries which really can follow our model, and we have the expertise, experience to offer. We should, because I see no reason why we should not. We have all, we have a sovereign rating both in the domestic and international markets. In the past 1 year alone, we have raised about $1.2 billion in the overseas markets. We are the first Indian corporate to raise 10-year green bond and trade it on the London Stock Exchange. So we are quite aggressive. Both domestic market, we raised about 50,000 crores this year. And we have been raising at extremely competitive rates. Of course, the bonds yields are hardening. We are aware of that. But that obviously consequentially means a higher cost of capital for our clients who have had a much easier run. But notwithstanding everything, consistently we have maintained NIMs above 4 and yields above 3. In fact, our yields were much closer to 4 mark earlier, but as you know, last year had been a year of softening. So notwithstanding all that, I think we will continue to maintain the momentum. We have plans to raise about $2 billion in the overseas markets this year. We are proposing also to raise a substantial amount in the domestic market, and we've always adopted a tactical approach in terms of raising resources so as to keep the cost low. And we manage it efficiently, as everyone knows, which is reflected in our profitability. let me put it in a perspective. There is no drop in demand. I think the demand continues to grow. It's grown around, on a CAGR of about 7 to 8%. And if at all there's some diminishment in terms of expectations, we were expecting double-digit growth in terms of the power demand. That didn't happen essentially also is because of the energy efficiency push. I mean, the overall energy efficiency devices alone contributed to about 1.2 to 1.3% reduction in terms of overall demand growth. So there is no fall in demand. I mean, I think we need to be very clear on that count. It has not grown at the expected rate, which was double digit. So that's pretty much on. The second is the policies of the government in terms of more effective, more efficient governance and unburdening the DISCOMs through Uday in terms of their own ability. They're creating a greater fiscal space so that they can make capital investments where it is most required. And the third is the renewable energy push in a big way, which again is contributing to greater availability of power in this country. And overall power installed capacity today is about 330,000 megawatts, which is substantial capacity. The demand is gradually picking up. Actually, you see in the last 1 month alone, there has been a big upsurge in demand, and we expect this to be sustained in the coming days. So the talk about the mismatch between the supply demand or there's an oversupply, I think you will soon see, if one is patient enough to wait, see that that's a thing of the past. We've always raised resources, as I mentioned, through various instruments, both in the domestic and in the international market. We adopt we have a policy in place. We have a strategic approach to managing the asset liability system. So we will continue to raise resources. I mean, this year we've raised, as I said, about $1.2 billion in the overseas markets, and about this year we are likely to raise about 50,000 crores in the domestic market. And next year, obviously, we are expecting a loan book growth of 15 to 20% or maybe even higher. Looking at the demand and the investments that are taking place, both in the generation, transmission, distribution, and the renewable energy segment and the frontier technologies. So there is a robust demand, both especially in the state sector and also in the CPSU joint venture sector and the private sector players. So we will continue to meet the needs of the country's development in the power sector, which is the main engine of growth. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. All the best. All the best. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate greatly for having me. Thank you.